along to the morning warm-up. I usually do it in my sketchbook. It's just to warm up before I start painting the block paintings, which I have a few of these to do today. I've already masked a couple up. This helps me to get into the flow and just to do exactly what I said it would, to warm up. Painted a couple of girls. They'll come up on my YouTube channel shortly. So, I want to do landscapes today, but usually to warm up I do abstracts because I find them quite calm and quite good. So I have my dagger brush and I'm going to try with purple today. I don't usually use purple for the abstracts. I don't like it. So we'll see how it goes. And I might add some permanent rose into that to make it a little bit more of a pink purple. Someone have said it's a dagger brush by Rosemary & Co. It's a travel brush. It's supposed to come undone, but this one doesn't. The purpose of this is just to get the hand ready. Mixing some more of the colour. So I'm not quite sure how these lives work. I know there's supposed to be questions, but honestly I can't see my camera because it's above me. So feel free to let me know what to do to answer any questions that you have while I'm working on this. Now in this sketchbook, it's not the paper that I normally used, mainly because I ordered the wrong book. Okay, that's not true. I ordered the one that I wanted, knowing that the paper wasn't what I normally used, but I wanted this cover. I thought it was cute. So to make abstracts work, you need to think about balance on the page. Even though it's an abstract and it probably, to many people, doesn't make a lot of sense, your eye still tries to make sense of it. And the way it does that is how it looks on the page and the contrast between lights and darks. So you'll see it's in a sweeping motion like this. And if we divide the page up into 3 parts each way, you can see it kind of follows kind of a line of sorts. And that just helps the mind make sense of the squiggles, I guess. Excuse the bracelets. They always make a noise. I try and do this most mornings, I don't often film it. And you can see on my brush I had like purple at the end and still a bit of pink, and it's made this nice effect. Rinse off my brush. Now I've got some nice light strokes in the background and a couple of darker ones, but I know that when this dries, that's going to lighten itself again. So just to intensify some of those darker areas, I'm going to go in with an even darker maroon, which is the Perylene Violet by Winsor & Newton, which is a lot darker. So I'm going to just drop some of that colour in. And when you're choosing your colours, you want colours that kind of harmonise together. And as a beginner, it's kind of hard to figure out what colours work. And sometimes when you do something, you might not like it and not realise the reason for it. And it could be that your colours just don't work well together. So take notice of paintings that you really do like and what colours you used. And that starts to give you a sense, without any training or anything, it gives you a sense of what colours are working for you and are working well together. So to be honest, I'm not really feeling it with this painting this morning. It doesn't seem to flow how I want it to. But that's not the point of it. And to be honest, I think it's the colours for me today. I'm not feeling pink or purple. So I'm going to change it. This is part of the warm-up. This is the practice. So page is wet. That's blank. I'll use that one. I'm going to go with my favourite colour, which is indigo. And starting off with a lot of water. So this one I did like a round. I'm going to try straight up the middle for today, for this particular one. See how I go. I'm liking that already. Okay, so you can see how there's like little blooms of when so I picked up some more paint. This is better. This is why a warm-up is so good. You kind of get the messy, annoying stuff out the way. Let's see, right from now I'm starting to feel it already. I really like the contrast. I like the shape. Maybe I'm just it's a beautiful sunny day today. Maybe I'm just in a blue mood. Not really, actually. I just like this colour. If you're an artist, or even if you're just painting as a hobby, I really strongly recommend that you have these warm-up pages. These are just places you don't have to share it, but you can just play without worrying. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. Without worrying about the outcome. And you'll get mornings where you make something and you're a little bit bleh. And then you'll get other mornings where right from the first painting it just goes how you wanted it to. So this is where sometimes you can overwork something. I like that shape, but at the moment it feels a little unbalanced because of this big kind of swirl here. It feels top heavy, but I'm worried that if I add anything more it's going to overwork it. but I do feel like something needs to go in the middle here just to balance it out slightly. So I'm going to give it a go. I liked that. Yeah, that works. And then the bottom. I think the key to abstract as well is breathing room. Don't put so much that the person looking at it can't breathe. Put enough in there so that they can interpret the rest themselves. Paper towel. Wipe off my brush. Now, I really like that, and this is the reason why. That very first stroke I put down, it's started to dry really nicely. But I'm not sure if you can see this section in here. There's some really nice little blooms of colour, but it has some darkness and some lightness, and it's that contrast that makes it feel like it's moving, like there's movement. Same here, in between here. We have enough darks to balance the lights. That's really nice. Some of these initial strings here, they were quite dark. They're not anymore. And I like it when it's dark, so I'm going to go over a couple of them. Just gently. Some of parts of the page will still be a little wet, and when it does, it will bloom a little more. This is such a calming and relaxing thing to do early in the morning. It's really nice. I like that. Just one brush stroke, it's given that a little bit more depth. This indigo colour as well, it has such a range of lights and darks. It can be any brand you like. I personally prefer the Winsor & Newton mix. I've always liked this dark indigo ever since I can remember. I like that. So like I said, I usually start with an abstract, but today my purpose is to paint a landscape. So these aren't the colours that I will use for the landscape. That's okay. It was good just to get my hand warmed up, and it hasn't taken very long at all. Maybe, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. But it's just like a nice calm way of starting the day. And it doesn't have to be painting. Sometimes I draw just with an ink pen. And lately I've been doing these cute little sketches, little mushrooms, because I've been experimenting with a glass dip pen. This is only a relatively cheap one from eBay, because I didn't know whether it would be something I'd like to do. So I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it for something that I wasn't sure if I'd keep going with. But I really like drawing, mainly abstracts. And sometimes that's enough too, just having that little experiment. Other days, I'll draw a face. You can see that was a daily warm-up. Looks a mess. That's okay. And these were just experiments. And I think the experiments is what eventually shows up in your work later on. So in my local area, I think I'm more known for my landscapes, even though my abstracts are something that I want to be known for. But these experiments, they give me a way to incorporate both. So I've started to really incorporate the abstracts into the landscapes, and I like the result. I don't do it all the time. So this is especially what I'm known for, these little block miniatures. And these are the landscapes, but at the right angle. You can really see the abstract of it, which I think is really pretty because it's not all the time. It depends on where you stand. I've got a couple drying outside at the moment that I've just varnished. And I've used the silver in the sky. And you really can't see it when you're standing straight on. So I think it's important to play and not just stick to one thing. I have this particular one on my YouTube channel already, and that was a daily warm-up. It had started with a drawing that I wanted to add colour to, and I don't like how it turned out, but it didn't matter. So I think looking at some of the experiences today, or some of the, I guess, inspiration, I don't want to do anything that's misty. It's a gorgeous sunny day here. And I'm interested in clean lines and clear skies. So I think I will start this block miniature. And even though the colours I went for earlier were blue and purple, I am going to go with what the day is reflecting today, which is incredibly bright and sunny. So I'm getting a bit of the yellow. I think it's Windsor yellow or cadmium, not sure. Some Windsor orange, both on the brush. I tend to mix on the page. Sometimes I mix on the palette as well. Just straight on the page. For me, that's not bright enough, so I'm going to get some more yellow and pop that in there. This is going to dry very differently as well. When I say very differently, a lot lighter. That's okay. This is what is often called a wet on dry technique. So it's wet paint on your brush and quite a lot of water in your brush straight onto dry paper. Now I'm just dropping in yellow in the sky. I wanted to bring that intensity up. And because the paper is dry, it is literally vacuuming the moisture out of the brush. I tend not to work with a lot of water anyway, mainly because it's so small. If it's a bigger work, definitely it calls for a lot more water in the brush. A little bit of permanent rose. to add just a slight gradient in the sky. And that orange, again, there's hardly any water on the brush. I'm going to intensify that a little bit more. I'm rinsing off my brush now. I'll pick some clean water up and dab it off. I don't want too much water on my brush, and I'm going to blend that out. I'm going to let that dry because I know it'll dry a little bit lighter. The page is not soaked with water, so it won't take too long. It'll only take a few minutes. And by leaving it like this, it makes a big difference in the mood of the picture at the end. So as an example, this one here, you can see, especially up the back here, there's quite a lot of feathering happening. And when it's like that, it means that the page is still quite wet. And so whenever you put watercolor onto a damp page, the way watercolor is made up is just ground up powder. And the only way that that powder moves around the page is if there is water or dampness present. So if the paper is dry, it just follows your brush, whereas if the paper is still wet, then that powder is going to find its own path wherever the moisture is, wherever the dampness in the paper still exists. A good way to check if you're not sure is putting your hand on it. That's still cool to touch, so I know that there's still water in that paper, whereas this, which is completely dry, there's no difference, there's no temperature difference. And the difference between a wet page and a dry page is sharp lines. And you can really see that in the abstracts. So this is why the abstracts too really help. You'll see where the page was dry. I'm not sure how easy it is to see. There are some very defined lines, whereas in pages where, in parts, where I dropped the colour, that feathering effect has happened. So these are all little experiments that help you to gauge what's happening with the colour, which is really good. Now I know that that's still wet. I can feel it. It's still quite cool to the touch. So I don't want to add my other layers yet. And this is a good experiment, actually. This is a good way to see that watercolor does take time because you need to wait for it to dry in between layers. Sometimes I'll work on another painting while I'm doing that. Other times it's just nice to sit and just slow down. It's very calming. So I'm not sure if there's any questions or anything because I don't know how this works. Oh, I said someone says hi, hi, and hi. So if you're still listening, hi. I've had to go up to look at the camera for that, look at the phone for that. I'm not quite sure how to work it with two devices. But now I'm starting to think about my colours. That's drying quite nicely in these sections here. It's kind of a hint of pink in the sky. And I know at first I was like, I'm not going to use the purple, but now I'm seeing the leftover colour that I used earlier, and I thought actually purple and orange, because of where they are on the colour wheel, they do complement each other, so I might make the hills purple. Shock horror, hills aren't purple. That's okay. Now if I'm patient, which you can tell right now I'm not, I'm starting to load up my brush. That's still cool to the touch. If I put this colour on now, it's going to feather out a little bit. And that's not what I want, because I really want this to be a very clean lines kind of feeling. I know a lot use a hairdryer to speed up the process, but I've always hated the sound of a hairdryer. It just grates on my ears, and I find this is a very nice relaxing process, so I don't want to disturb it with the blare of a hairdryer going in the background. I know what I'll do. I'll start my second piece. So you can see that I do this with all my paintings. I mount this onto a block of wood, and some people worry that the painting will be ruined if it's not behind glass because of the nature of watercolour. But just like with other mediums like oils and acrylics, I always varnish my watercolours. Sometimes spray varnish, sometimes brush varnish. It depends on the effect that I'm after. With these blocks, I found them to be very, very durable. Only very occasionally has something happened to them, and it's usually my fault. This one, it's actually one of my favourite little abstract paintings, this one. But you can see that the paper has bubbled, and I knew that before I started, that the paper wasn't attached properly, but I still used it anyway. So I just kept this for myself. If that happens, then yeah, I can't use it for a painting that I'm going to sell. Yeah, this was just an accident. I wasn't paying attention when I was gluing it down. But yeah, I attach for the bigger blocks. There's always a hook on the back. And for the smaller blocks, it depends on where it's going. Here's a different one. For the smaller blocks, they stand quite nicely on their own, depending what format it is. But on some of them, like this one here, I've just attached a sticky dot. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah, it's very, very light. And that sticky dot, it's like a removable, and I just stick it straight onto the wall, and that way it sits flush with the wall then. I really like that. But this piece, this is one of my favourite little abstracts, actually. And I entered this into an art competition, so I'm just hanging on to it till I find out the results. You can see I'm sticking my hands all over it. I'm not too worried because I know it has been varnished. In order to clean the dust off, I just get a microfiber cloth and wipe it off. It's not a big deal for me. But you can see too, in some parts it's still got quite a shine to it, and that's the varnish, which I think is quite nice. All right, this is still a tiny wee bit damp, but I'm quite impatient now. So what I might do is I might make my first mountain ridge, and you can see they're quite harsh, clean lines, which is good. My brush is quite dry. Now the further away a mountain is, the lighter it appears to our eyes. Next time you're outside and you have a view of the mountains, just notice that the ones in the distance, they can be all sorts of different colours compared to the ones that are closer to you. And they're usually a lot lighter and far less detailed. So that's the first layer of mountains. And I have to wait for this one to dry. Now already the sky is quite dry. I can see that. I can feel it too. So I'm going to work at putting a small abstract in the sky. Now, because of the colours, it would benefit from maybe a gold pattern in the sky, but I'm going to go a little bit different. I'm going to go silver instead. Now, these are metallic watercolours, and this particular one is from Coliro. I think Coliro. And what I found with these is that you have to be patient with them. Again, it's a good lesson for me, being patient. You put the water in and you have to let it sit. It's not like a normal watercolour that's hardened in the pan. You have to let it sit. And what that does is it loosens up that hard cake of powder and glitter, basically. I think they use mica. That's a bit softer. And with metallic watercolours, because they're made of a different kind of ground powder, they behave slightly differently. And I've found, especially with these colours, they need to be a little bit more like a pasty consistency before they transfer well onto the paper. Just like that. It's just satisfying to watch that and play with that. It's really nice. So it's, I'm not sure if it's easier to see. Hopefully it can focus, but it's kind of got quite a like pasty consistency. So I'm trying to wipe off the excess in the pan and get a point. I'm doing the same, or thinking of the same principle as the abstracts that I did earlier as a practice, is we want a sense of flow. We want it to be subtle, but we want it to not feel awkward. So practicing a couple of times, I want it to come around like from the left and kind of curve a little around to the right. I know that I'm going to put more layers down the bottom. Actually, that's dry. Let's do that now before I start talking again too much. So I'm going to mix up some more colour. I am using Permanent Rose again, just with a little bit of Windsor Violet. Some more water in there. And I'm going to pop in another mountain range. Yeah, that's good. Nice sharp line there. And automatically, just by using 2 layers, I've created a sense of depth, because it feels like this mountain is in front of that one, just by the colours that I used. So let's pick up more of this silver. Like I said, I'm going to pull it over. Well, like that. So that felt very natural. It felt very organic, that flow. And now I'm just going to build on that. Turn it around so I've got better access to you. So I'm trying to follow that very organic feeling line. I'm just extending it. Some people asked how long it had taken me to paint a miniature like this. You can see that with the warm-ups, with the deciding with the drying time, it can take a lot longer than you think, not just the 8 or 10 minutes that you often see on YouTube. Also, once you get into a bit of a flow, you can really, you can do quite a few at once. Sometimes I can do 4 at once, but they're usually on a particular theme, and I'm very clear about the colours that I'm using and the composition of the mountains. So I'm going to add another layer here. I know that this is still a teeny bit wet, but remember how I said that when you're looking at a mountain range, the mountains that are closest to you tend to increase in detail, and that's what I want with this. So even though it's a little bit wetter, now I'm mixing perylene violet with the purple, so I want that deep colour. And I'm only going to put, there we go, so that the eye doesn't get too confused. See how this one is quite detailed in the ridge shape, and the one behind it has a flow. I want the one at this next layer to be quite simple, because now we're thinking about balance in the picture. I've already added this detail to the sky. You don't want so much detail and so much difference that you get confused, or that your eye gets confused. So even though it's really hard to see the details in the top, once it's tilted to the light, like look, it just pops. It's just beautiful. So I'm not sure if you can see it. Hopefully the camera will focus in on this. So this bottom layer has some very slight feathering because the layer before it still wasn't quite dry. And that's okay, because this is closer to us, and so it kind of gives the illusion that there are bushes. Now I'm going to do one more layer at the bottom, and I'm going to use a very different colour. I'm going back with my indigo, which is the one that we used in our warm-up, just here, for the very closest layer of landscape to us, the viewer. Now I'm going to load it up because I don't want this to take the focal point. I know this is quite a strong colour, and this is quite wet, this layer. I can see it. There's a shine to it. You can probably see it on the camera. I'm just going to add this very loaded indigo pigment into the foreground, and it's quite rough because we want to give the illusion of foliage and bushes, because that's the details that we can see when we're closer. And that is feathering beautifully and looking very good. A lot of people also ask why it's this shape. I had an exhibition and I wanted it to be square, but I do like the landscape format, and so I just made a template of the size that I wanted. I can't remember what it is now. Yep, it's about 4 centimeters by 7, I think. Yeah, 7.5. And I just liked the feel of that shape. And so I made that template, and so now all of my work, whether it's portrait or landscape, has those dimensions if it's in the square format. With my blocks are usually around 9 centimeters by 7 centimeters, and I really like this format, whether it is in portrait form or if it's in landscape form. I like small things. So yeah, it wasn't a conscious choice. It was just something that I liked, and so I've stuck with. And I use it no matter what I paint now. So you can see they're very different, but they're very cute, if I may say so myself. But I think part of the nice thing about being creative is that you have the freedom to choose what you like and run with it and experiment. Like, I painted on a rock. I painted a galaxy on a rock, and I think it's cute. There's even some sparkles in this one. I used the sparkle paint. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but this is something that we used to do as kids, and then when you grow up, you never do it. But it's still fun. So you may as well do it. I have another little rock that I found. And to be honest, I don't know if I want to paint this one because it already looks cool on its own. And if I was to paint it, how would I improve on that kind of magical look? I don't know. Anyway, I digress. So now comes my favourite part, basically. It is pulling off the tape. I don't know how many questions I get about what tape I use. It's on my website. It's called Nido tape. It's a masking tape. It's from Japan. I stumbled across it, and when I found that it worked with this paper, it never tore the paper. I've never looked back, and I buy it in bulk. So that's why I use this tape. So let's see how beautifully this can be peeled off. Look at that clean, sharp line. Tell me that that is not satisfying. And I won't believe you. That is cool. I like that. And then when you angle it, then you can see that abstract coming out in the sky. I like it. I always sign the bottom in the same place every time. And now I'll wait for that to dry because it's not dry yet. And then I'll varnish it. I will put the brass hook on the back so it can be hung. And this particular one is going in a show next week. I have a gallery show for 2 weeks up in a small town in the north of the state that I'm in. And I'm excited. I've never been there before. So we're going to be driving some beautiful countryside to get there. And I really look forward to that. So thank you for joining me on my morning warm-up today. We did a lot. We did some abstracts and we painted a miniature landscape. This one was quite simple, so it was nice. I hope to do more of these in the future. Let me know what you think and if it's something that you enjoy, or if you want to paint along as well. I'd love to see what you painted. Thank you.